A deadline pushback. Legislators giving themselves more time to pass the state budget. We'll speak with an expert panel to break down the details heading into the final stretch for that budget. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. The process of passing the state budget looks to last a little bit longer this year. The state extending the budget deadline from April 1st to April the 4th. The extension now giving them lawmakers more time to continue to hash out details on the important budget items. One big item still getting debated, education funding. The governor's proposed changes to foundation aid, but both houses in the legislature rejected it. Top lawmakers commenting on the budget progress so far.
We continue again to talk about how to move forward as it relates to school funding and the importance of doing a study that will allow us with updated data to look at how we fund our schools prospectively.
I feel like we're on the same planet. I don't know if we're in the same country, in the same state yet, but we're at least on the same planet on what has to happen on all of the big items.
Joining us now is an expert panel to give insight and analysis on the state budget. We have Assemblyman John McDonald, Democrat, representing the 108th, and Patrick Orecki, the Director of State Studies for the Citizens Budget Commission. Thank you both for coming in on a busy week as we head towards Easter. Where are we right now? I know there's a little bit of a reprieve now until they get back in town. I'll start with you, John. Close, far? How big of a chasm do we have here?
I think we're close. I really do. I think there's a couple outstanding issues, but they're not insurmountable. Nothing like last year, where they were really not even in the same planet by any stretch of the imagination. We did do an extension till April 4th, just to make sure that the public employees get paid. But I think we're actually in a decent spot where it's conceivable by April 4th, April 5th, a budget could be done.
It felt like school aid was a big issue for a lot of people. Is that being resolved? Because I know lawmakers wanted it left alone or put the money back in, and the governor had something else in mind. Yeah. Have you kind of bridged that gap? Either one of you could jump in there on that.
Well, I'll offer the fact that I think we're close in regards to getting back to where we need to be and addressing the concerns that was bipartisan throughout the whole state. You know, the truth of the matter, though, is we need to have a solution going forward for the years to follow. Families aren't as big as anymore. There's not as many children going to school, and the formula was very driven by how many students you had in the classroom. We need to be mindful of the fact that that change to the formula needs to be at least considered. It's been about 18, 19 years since that formula has been in place.
Gotcha. Patrick, thoughts?
Yeah, it's no surprise that school aid is kind of the #1 thing to be thinking about. First of all, because it's the biggest part of the state-funded portion of the budget. It's over $30 billion a year that the state is sending down to nearly 700 districts across the state. So touches every corner of the state. It's a huge thing for local taxpayers and a huge piece of the state budget. So not a surprise that it's kind of the #1 issue.
I think the last time you and I talked, you were a little concerned, it might have been months ago, budget gaps, the money coming in versus the money going out the door. Where do you stand on all of that? Is it looking better or is it still a concern?
Yeah, it's still a concern. It is looking better to a degree. You know, there's two kind of factors here that we're looking at. First of all is whether the budget is balanced on paper. Right now there are gaps in the out years, but tax receipts are continuing to improve. That's great, and some of those gaps might be solved over time. Our bigger concern is the second part, which is that the state is still using a lot of non-recurring revenue in the budget right now from temporary tax increases, still has some federal aid from COVID, and that goes away over time. So the structural problem, we think, is even bigger.
Right now, especially in New York City, crime's become a big issue. And I don't know how much of any of that ties into the migrant situation. Maybe they're trains on separate tracks, but where is that in the budget? Is that being addressed, do you think, John, with money going towards fighting crime? And I know the governor's talking about retail crime and trying to deal with that as well.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and you know, once again, people's views will be their own views, but statistically, crime is continuing to drop. However, people don't feel that way, and if that's a perception, you have to deal with that as a reality. Retail theft is a big issue, not only in New York State, but throughout the country. And I think a lot of people it really resonates with them. They just can't get over the concept of having somebody unlocking a case to get a tube of toothpaste. They can't get over the boldness of individuals walking in with a shopping cart and walking out with 20 bottles of Tide detergent. It's bold, it's brazen, and that's why the governor's been right to say we need to do something, we need to do something now. There's going to be financial resources that the legislature is supporting, and there's discussions about increased penalties. That's admittedly in the legislature, that's always a difficult conversation. But we need to be at least taking a look at the bad actors that are actually facilitating these fencing operations to get things sold on the internet. So I think that's a major issue.
Patrick, any areas you're looking at specifically that you'd like to see funded or that maybe can be reined in?
Yeah, I think outside of the general numbers, housing is really huge for us too. You know, pretty much every household in New York, their housing costs are #1 in their personal budget, so it makes sense that the state is taking an approach to challenging, housing costs in its budget. So that's an area that we really want to focus on, not only production but affordability of housing too, especially in the downstate area where there's more opportunities for growth. There's next to no vacant apartments in New York City. We can have more people, growing our state. We just need state and local policies to boost production.
And we really need to come to an agreement somehow, because the reality is when you look at this conversation about people leaving New York State, in the top 5 states, sure, Florida and Texas with better climates are there. And for people who are over 60, they want to retire. They don't have to go to work on Monday.
Sure.
However, number 2, 3, and 5 is New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. The weather is not that much better there, but the affordability is. And this is where, I know our speaker has talked about this, that the fact that the real estate community and the labor community needs to get together to find something that's going to work financially to provide more opportunities for increased housing, and also to make sure that that increased housing is affordable. Because affordability on your average household expenses is really what's been resonating with people. It was pre-pandemic, it got exacerbated during the pandemic, and it still is an issue today.
Yeah, the old phrase, a rising tide brings up all the boats. Inflation really has dragged on everything, hasn't it, as well, in terms of building housing, supplies, those things. I mean, it's sort of the water that goes everywhere on the sidewalk, isn't it? That if inflation is coming down a little bit, but if that can come down, that's going to help solve a lot of these problems.
Inflation rate increases have come down, but don't forget, that's on top of what was a 7 or 8% increase.
Right.
So people are still feeling that discomfort, and it's something that we need to keep focusing on. I say this all the time to my colleagues, you want to do more. That's admirable. I guess some of you were elected to do that, but we also got to remember to do good at what we're supposed to be doing first. And I think that's where we're failing, to be honest with you.
The nuts and bolts of education, housing, fixing the potholes, I guess. Right?
Healthcare too. Healthcare is a major issue. Medicaid, obviously, a major issue.
We've only got a minute and a half. Would people be shocked how much, it looks like a huge number when you look at these billions in a budget, but how much of that before you can even negotiate is already sort of earmarked for things, right? Huge chunks of it have to be committed to things like healthcare and Medicaid, these things, correct?
Yeah, especially in the case of the Medicaid program, when you include federal funds, that's the biggest program in the budget. And when you throw in local money too, we're at about $100 billion a year in the total cost of that program. And that is paying for benefits for people. So if they're eligible, you pay for the service. So there's not a lot of wiggle room there. You need to kind of be proactive about what your policy is and how it addresses people's needs to try to bring down those costs.
Last 20 seconds. So, John, do you think we get this done in a few days when you guys get back, or is somebody going to toss something in the middle of it? And
No, I don't think there's any deal breaker. I think it's just a matter of getting the parties aside. I would think by April 4th, April 5th, we should have a budget put to bed.
All right. Well, John McDonald, Assemblyman, and Patrick Orecki from the Citizens Budget Commission. Want to make sure I get that right. Thank you for coming in today. Happy Easter and good luck next week as you guys get back in town.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. New York taking steps now to ensure incoming migrants have access to basic needs. When we come back, we'll hear from an immigration advocate on the somewhat controversial pilot program giving debit cards to some migrant families. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. New York's migrant situation continues to develop, the state taking several steps to increase resources and opportunities for incoming asylum seekers. New York City announcing a pilot program that will give out prepaid debit cards to families in order that they could buy food and baby supplies. The city will present 115 cards for 460 people. That includes children. The program will run for 6 weeks. A family of 4 would get $350 weekly. City officials say that they are confident the program won't see widespread abuse.
Try to go to Bloomingdale's and use it for shoes, it will be rejected. If there are things that we see where people abuse it, we can take the card back. This is not something extra that we're doing. This is us trying to think of an innovative way to make sure that we are giving people what we're required to give them, but that we are being efficient and not wasteful.
Joining us now to give a reaction to these and other issues facing New York in this ongoing migrant situation, once again, Murad Ouadeh, the Executive Director for the New York Immigration Coalition. Murad, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let me jump in with the one that, probably got the cover of the New York Post when it happened, the handing out of debit cards to asylum seekers. Big controversy in some circles. What's your take on that? Is it a lot of smoke and mirrors? Really, this is just money that would have gone to them another way. It's easier to give them a debit card?
Yeah, I think that the outrage over people being able to purchase food that's, culturally competent for themselves and to start empowering them to actually get on a road to self-sufficiency is not really a controversial issue. The city's actually saving millions of dollars by doing this, as opposed to providing people with food. They're empowering them for a fraction of the cost to purchase their own food. The city's mandated to provide 3 meals a day for people in shelter, and providing the debit card does not mean that they have to, and they're actually saving money by giving people these food cards to be able to support themselves and really move forward and building their lives for themselves and their family.
And there are guardrails in place, right? Somebody can't take a card and go in and get a 12-pack of beer and, and a bunch of, junk food with it.
Yeah.
This is designed to be used for food and diapers and those kind of things.
It's actually not even meant to be used for diapers. It's just specifically for food.
Gotcha.
So you can only purchase food with these cards. There's nothing else that you can do with it. And it's the equivalent of, what a SNAP and WIC
Right.
recipient would be receiving as well. So it's not like anyone's getting more than someone else in this situation. Folks who are unhoused and have access to benefits are all receiving the same level of support from the city.
Does it drive you a little crazy? I'm going to say this for a second. I'll hear somebody say, well, that's money that could have gone to a homeless veteran. You can help the homeless veteran and help an asylum seeker at the same time, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the scarcity mentality doesn't really help anyone. What we need are real solutions that we've been presenting to be implemented by government. We shouldn't be allowing folks to divide us, because the same people who are initially were sharing shelters, there was no separation. Everyone was in one shelter. If you were a veteran, a historical New Yorker, everyone was in the same shelter. Everyone had the same exact needs internally within the shelter, and continue to need additional support until people are able to get on their feet. So if they're a veteran or not, they should be given the support that they need. But the funny part is that we see, like we just seen recently in South Brooklyn, where a veteran shelter was being built, and the same people protesting migrants were there protesting a veteran shelter from being built. So I think that this is more of people just not wanting to support people in the hardest of times.
I saw going through all the budget stuff that there was about $150 million carved out that someone was pushing for legal aid. Talk about that a little bit. What would that money be used for? For immigration lawyers to help individuals when they come here and they're seeking asylum?
Yeah, so we have been fighting for the Access to Representation Act, which is a comprehensive way of building out the immigration legal services ecosystem across the state of New York. We didn't have enough immigration lawyers before, and we don't have enough immigration lawyers right now. So we want to be able to be building out a better system by investing more resources into that system, being able to train more attorneys to become immigration attorneys, but also ensure organizations are prepared and ready to take on additional clients, and making sure that the lawyers are doing what the lawyers need to do, and they have staffing that's support staff to do the other work. So this year we're asking for $150 million in the state budget for immigration legal services. We didn't have enough immigration legal services, 5 years ago, let alone today. Our goal now is to really make sure that we're powering ourselves into the future, And Governor Hochul included $45 million in her budget. The Senate and Assembly included an additional 30. We're at the halfway mark, which is $75 million. We really want to get up to $150 million to be able to provide people with immigration lawyers, because we know that they have 10.5 time chance of winning their case when they're represented in court by an attorney. So we want to make sure that no one has to go up against a government-trained attorney without having competent legal counsel, and also move ourselves into a more humane process here in the state of New York.
I saw the governor also was sort of relaxing some of the rules to get a state job, some of the language requirements. Is that working at all in terms of getting asylum seekers into jobs? And again, I hate to use a phrase that no one else wants, but some of these are tough jobs, whether they're custodial or whatever. Is it helping to get some of these asylum seekers working?
You know, we, as a state, we lost over 400,000 individuals from our state over the past 4 years. This is an incredibly golden opportunity for us to be able to rebound as quickly as we can with this new population and them wanting to be a workforce. So we applauded Governor Hochul's decision to actually expand the definition of who can apply for these jobs. What we do know is that there are many jobs still vacant, and we know that people want to work in the formal economy, but either they're challenged with getting into legal services to help fill out their paperwork, or they have gotten legal services and our federal government is just very slow in responding to their applications. So, you know, we do still have jobs that are open, and, you know, the immigrant community has historically helped ensure that we are continuously contributing back to society and helping build our great state, from our roads to our bridges to our skyscrapers, to the labor on our farms, and beyond. So making sure that we're always stepping in when we need to.
All right, I'd love to talk to you more, Murad Owade, but we're running out of time with the New York Immigration Coalition. I know you're busy, and it's not going to change. You'll be busy as we go forward. Thank you for coming on today. Best of luck with everything, and we'll circle back maybe in a few weeks or months, and we'll see how you're doing there after they get that budget through and where you landed with that funding.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. Lawmakers making a push to see the state's COVID-19 performance reviewed. I hear from both sides of the issue of the COVID-era nursing home deaths. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. As the state's COVID response continues to develop now with relaxed guidelines that match the new guidance from the CDC, some lawmakers are calling for accountability for those seniors who died from COVID while in nursing homes. Senate Republicans and state Republican lawmakers taking to the Capitol for a call for an independent report on the state's COVID-19 response to be released. This follows a report from the New York Attorney General's office that found that the state undercounted the number of deaths due to COVID in nursing homes by up to 50%. Officials on both sides of the issue are sounding off.
As far as what needs to be reviewed, you know, I think what's the question is, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to learn something, or are you trying to blame somebody? I've already learned a lot. I'm always open to new ideas, but I'm not blaming anybody anymore for anything.
Blame's a different word. How about accountability? When we had 15,000 deaths, probably more. So someone's got to be held accountable for that. And secondly, and perhaps more importantly, we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. So what are the recommendations that they have to make sure that this tragedy doesn't repeat itself?
A new traffic safety law is now in effect that state leaders hope will increase driver safety. You may know about the Move Over law. It requires drivers to slow down and move one lane over to the left if a first responder is pulled over on the right. They're now expanding it to include all vehicles. So if you see any kind of a car or vehicle pulled off on the side of the road, you must now slow down or change lanes if it's safe to do so. According to the governor's office, more than 36 state police vehicles have been struck just in the last 3 years while on the side of the road. Supporters of the measure say that this Move Over law helped keep police safer, and they're hoping this expansion will have a similar effect.
I remember when I first got my license, one of the things we learned early was that emergency vehicles, you have to move to the adjoining lane to move out of the way. And so hoping that those education opportunities will ensue.
By the way, not moving over can result in penalties for the driver. State police say over 18,000 tickets have been issued since 2022 before this new provision took effect. Stick around. We'll take a look at the week ahead in just a bit. And a reminder, if you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out to us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Finally, at Empire State Weekly, we return to the budget now. We are keeping an eye on the coming week as the budget deadline's been extended now through April 4th. As lawmakers return to the Capitol, we'll be on the lookout for any additional extensions or maybe sticking points in budget negotiations that could lead to more delays. Once the budget's passed, we'll look to track any fallout of what programs ultimately got funded. For now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We'll see you right here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's a full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 TV stations across the great state of New York.